Actually, I mentioned during the presentation that preparation is a hot topic for recent graduate students, recent graduate dentists. So we had this lecture by Dr. Mustafavi, and she provided us the uh, rules for preparation for digital processes and CAD/CAM restorations. Uh, I do remember we had uh, chamfer design and shoulder bevel from the back uh, dental school, and we used to prepare the tooth by shoulder bevel and uh, chamfer in the lingual aspect of the tooth. But recently, we have new uh, rules, new uh, design. So, Dr. Mustafa, can you give us a brief a message for audience regarding the preparation? And although we did have the lecture, but since we have a couple of minutes here, we're gonna take advantage of this time. And since you're here, please give us more information. Go on.
Okay, hello again to the audience. As the doctor mentioned, bringing CAD/CAM technology in dentistry is going to be a wide promotion. And because I'm involved in pre-clinic teaching of dental students, I propose to use CAD/CAM technology from the first grade
Perfect.
in the pre-clinics to teach them and to make them familiar with this technology, because with this technology they can evaluate themselves, and they can see the preparation, they can see the reductions, the undercuts, and they can have feedback before they call the professor. And it is very, very important. We can use different aspects of CAD/CAM technology in our practice, in even in teaching. I mean, in education, it is very important to use it. When we can use this platform, why not? And
Sure.
So you mean that the students after preparation scan the preparation and see it in look at carefully to it
yes,
at the,
definitely.
inside the monitor what they have done,
Yes.
like what we saw in the some schools that have quantum heads and a monitor, and the students can see what they have done inside the monitor. On the
Yes,
monitor
yes, it can facilitate the process, and it
of
can.
learning.
Yes, yes, it is very.
Perfect. So, although I believe that if we go with the traditional way, so the students have a good understanding of preparation and conventional impression, and when they are familiar with this concept, then next step we go on and we go with the oral scanner. So my idea is for preclinical procedure, maybe it's a little bit soon to get involved with students, but maybe for the first fixed prosthodontics in the clinic, that would be very useful. And I do remember a couple of years ago, I went to USC and I saw more than 10 CAD/CAM and CEREC oral scanner that all the uh, all the fixed prosthodontics departments, they just do the scanning and they don't do any more conventional impression. So that's the new technology, and for sure, very soon everybody get involved with that, and we're going to take advantage of this technology. In like 10 years ago, the accuracy of the CAD/CAM restoration, like first generation of CEREC, they believe that there is a 200 micron gap between the restoration and the tooth, and it wasn't consistent. It means that it was sometimes 200 microns, sometimes like more than 200 microns, up to 500 microns. But now, what we do scan and what we believe on 25 micron gap between the restoration and the tooth, which provides enough space for the cement, that's the things that we do apply to the restoration nowadays, and they're really accurate, and we can trust on the restoration.
Exactly, that's the point. Every time that when a new technology is introduced, it has a progress, and sometimes it's better to wait. And then pioneers use the technology, and then they give us the feedback. And after the development reaches to a good level, we go to use it.
Exactly.
I think just pioneers, because most of the time these kind of technologies are very expensive at the beginning, but little by little it become more popular, more less expensive, and with less flaws, just
Yes.
like the CAD/CAM and the progress that it has in these years. And now it is predictable, it is reliable, but in the past it was not that much.
Yeah, that's a learning curve.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
go with the trial and error. After a while, we get expert, and nowadays these technology is more accurate and more practical for everybody. So, Dr. Mustafi, do you have any comment regarding preparation, or we can move on? It's 11:30, so we can introduce the next lecturer.
Yes.
Any hint, any recommendation for us?
No, I would like, if the audience has any question, I would be happy to answer the question through my connections. Thank you.
So please message us and write down your questions. We can answer the question. Meanwhile, next lecturer, Dr. Mahia Hassanzadeh, she graduated in 2015 from Isfahan, and then she came to Tehran Dental University for advanced graduate prosthodontics. She received her master in 2018, and since that time, she's teaching as a faculty in advanced prosthodontics departments. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassanzadeh. Carry on, please.
Hello, everyone. Hope that everyone is safe and well, and hope that you have enjoyed the program up to now. We are gonna to talk about the interesting topic of CAD/CAM ceramic materials. How do you usually choose your restorative material? Today's clinician faces a complex decision process when choosing a ceramic restorative material because the high number of products available in the market and the speed at which the new products are being introduced. The selection is seldom made on the basis of a true understanding of the material's characteristics, and actually more often it's based on the criteria such as the strength measured in the in vitro studies, degree of translucency, manufacturing technique, the preference of our technician, or even the advertising of the productive claims. Before going to the ceramic blocks, let's take a quick look at the ceramic classification. Classifying the ceramics based on the presence of specific attributes in their formulation, divide them into three groups. The first group is the glass matrix ceramics, which are the non-metallic inorganic ceramic materials that contain glassy falls. The second group is polycrystalline ceramics, non-metallic inorganic ceramic material that do not contain any glassy falls. And finally, the recent introduced ceramics, resin matrix ceramics, which are the polymer matrix that contain predominantly inorganic refractory compounds that may include porcelain, glasses, ceramics, and glass ceramics. The glass matrix ceramics is divided into three subgroups of feldspathic ceramic, synthetic ceramic, and glass infiltrated ceramic, and polycrystalline ceramic is divided into four subgroups of alumina, alumina toughened zirconia, zirconia toughened alumina, and stabilized zirconia. And the last group is divided into two subgroups of resin nanoceramic and polymer infiltrated glass ceramic. Let's start with the feldspathic blocks. Feldspathic material are used as veneering material on metal or on ceramic substrate, or even as an aesthetic material, which are bonded onto the structure. Feldspathic blocks are made of materials similar to the conventional feldspathic ceramic, but produced in a different process known as extrusion molding. The first CAD-CAM produced inlay in 1985 was a feldspathic block from Vita company, and it was Vita Mark I. The block was fully sintered, and it was designed for hard machining. After 6 years, Vita company introduced the second generation of its Vita block with Vita Mark II blocks, which was a feldspathic block, and they reported the flexural strength for this block from about 100 megapascal to 160 when glazed. Clinical study of Vita Mark II inlays showed that this block inlays survival rates of 94% after 5 years and 85% after 10 years. That seems good. So Vita Block Mark II is a feldspathic block from Vita company, and the flexural strength is 100 to 160 megapascal, and we know this block as a one-step material, means that you can mill it, polish it, and sit it without any other heat treatment. But in another choice, you can glaze it. Vita Block Mark II is available in different size and shades, and Vita company offered its blocks with the shade of Vita 3D Master Shade Guide. The indication of the Vita Block Mark II is for small aesthetic reconstruction, inlays, onlays, crowns, and veneers. Whenever you have an enamel around your preparation, then Vita block blend perfectly into the remaining two substrates. Vita Block Trilux and Trilux 4 are products from the proven Mark II ceramic. Again, it's a one-step material. You can only polish it or glaze it. But what's the difference between Vita Mark Trilux 4 and Vita Mark II? In addition to the excellent reflective effect and the white fluorescence of Mark II blocks, various chroma and translucency level can be combined in one block in Trilux 4, and as a result, they differ significantly from the monochromatic Vita Block Mark II. They allow the characteristic color gradient present in the natural dentition to be replicated, both in terms of translucency and intensity, so facilitating the integration of the restoration into the residual tooth substrate or residual dentition. So it's indicated for highly aesthetic reconstruction in the visible area, I mean anterior crowns or veneers. But what are the concepts behind these blocks? The concept is integrated shade gradient of 4 layers of shade intensity. So you can freely move your restoration in the block, and the level of translucency and chromacity depends on the way you move the restoration in the block. The restoration can be moved in all 3 directions for maximum design freedom. And so you can adjust the translucency of your restoration just by 1 click. The other product of Vita company in the family of feldspathic blocks is Vita Real Life. Real Life is a bit different. We have a multicolor block again, but we have a 3-dimensional structure in the block. It's kind of a nose-shaped structure, and it has the shade of dentin, so it's chromatic, but the surrounding area is pretty translucent like enamel. Due to the spherical curve dentin core, which is surrounded by an enamel coat, the layer structure is almost identical to that of natural anterior teeth. So without any additional step for characterization, layering, or staining. You have an aesthetic restoration. And so it's highly recommended for anterior veneers and crowns. The other blocks that are available in the market, Feldspathic blocks, is from Dentsply Sirona company with the name Serec blocks and Serec block polychromatic. Again, there are Feldspathic blocks with flexural strength about 120 megapascal, and it can be glazed or polished. And several Serec blocks are available with three color, with three translucency: translucent, medium translucent, and opaque. Serec block CIN is a block, actually is similar to real life from Vita. It's again a feldspathic block, polychromatic for natural looking anterior crowns, and the indication is for anterior crowns and veneers. And similar to Vita block real life, the Serec block CIN is have a highly chromatic internal core, which is molded on the morphology of the dentin of natural teeth and is surrounded by a more translucent ceramic layer. The minimum recommended thickness for Serec blocks are 0.5 millimeters. In this slide, you see that the Serec software automatically position the restoration design in the block so that the dentin and enamel shades are precisely matched, and you can adjust the translucent and position of the block for the best result. So in summary, feldspathic blocks are indicated for inlays, onlays, and occlusal veneers, but they're not indicated for posterior molars. It's good for premolars. It's also indicated for anterior crowns, anterior veneers, but it's contraindicated for anterior or posterior bridge and Maryland bridges. We should not use feldspathic blocks for anterior or posterior bridges. The next group of the ceramics that we are going to talk is the LEUCITE reinforced ceramic. IPS Impress CAD from Ivoclar company, which was introduced in 2006. It has about 45% LEUCITE with a finer particle size of about 1 to 5 microns that helps resist machining damage. And it has a flexural strength about 160 megapascal. Again, we can use these blocks only with polishing, or you can glaze it. Clinically, it is recommended for single tooth restoration and is available in high translucence, IPS Impress CAD HT, low translucence, Impress CAD LT, and polychromatic blocks, IPS Impress CAD Multi. The mill restoration can in the next step be stained and glazed. Another example in this category, LEUCITE reinforced ceramics, is Paradigm C from 3M company. And LEUCITE reinforced ceramics are indicated for inlays, onlays, but they are not recommended for occlusal veneer due to their low flexural strength. They are not recommended for molars crown. They're good for premolars crown, and they are indicated for anterior crowns and veneers. Let's go with lithium disilicate family. Lithium disilicates glasses have their flexural strength between 350 to 450 megapascal, and this is significantly higher than that of LEUCITE reinforced dental ceramics. IPS IMAX CAD, a lithium disilicate ceramic, was introduced in 2006 and is a cherry-side monolithic restorative material. These blocks, IPS IMAX CAD, are available in A to D and bleach shades, and as well as in 3 translucencies. But if you go and buy a lithium disilicate IPS Max CAD blocks, you find them in a pre-crystallized or blue state. But why IPS Max CAD blocks are in blue state? Machining of fully sintered ceramics typically creates significant tool wears and residual surface flaws that could in long term be detrimental for the in vivo performance of the ceramic. A solution was pre-crystallized or partially crystallized ceramics, which was introduced with lithium disilicate system. The blue ceramic contains a metasilicate and lithium disilicate nucleus and exhibited a flexural strength of 130 megapascal. And at this state, the blocks can be easily milled, after which the restoration is recrystallized in the furnace for about 20 to 25 minutes with the temperature of 850 centigrade. During this heat treatment, the metasilicates are dissolved and lithium disilicate crystals and the ceramic is glazed at the same time. The block also changed from blue to the chosen shade and translucency. In this state, the ceramic contains 70% of crystals of approximately 1.5 microns in the size, and the strength increased dramatically into 360 megapascal. In this slide, you can see milled restoration from the pre-crystallized block or blue state blocks. After the crystallization, the restoration will shrink 2 to 3%. As this amount is not significant, you can have a try-in with the pre-crystallized restoration and then put it in the furnace and crystallize it and glaze it. But it said that we have different types of IPS Max CAD blocks. The first is IPS Max CAD HD, high translucence. The high translucent materials contains fewer and larger crystals of lithium metasilicate in the pre-crystallized state. And after full crystallization, heat treatment for 10 minutes, the HD ceramic exhibits layered lithium disilicate crystals with the size of 1.5 microns in a glassy matrix and a highly soluble lithium phosphide spherical crystals. Evocolor company also offer IPS Max CAD MT and LT, medium translucence and low translucence. Let's first speak about the low translucence. The low translucent materials contains a higher density of smaller crystals, and the fully crystallized LT ceramics exhibited a high density of a small size with 0.8 microns interlocked lithium disilicate crystals together with spherical pores. Empty blocks demonstrate a medium translucency and they are used for restoration that require more brightness than HD restoration and more translucency than LT. So it's something between LT and HD. The other block from IPS Max CAD is IPS Max CAD MO, medium opacity. These blocks are designed for core or framework, and they should be layered for desirable aesthetic results. They also offer in 5 different shades. The other blocks from the Evocolor is IPS Max CAD Impulse. Impulse is the block range has been expanded to include impulse shades, and this includes 3 value shades and 2 opal shades. The value blocks are for lifelike brightness value in the crown, and the opal blocks are for highly aesthetic, minimally invasive veneers with a minimum thickness of 0.3 millimeter. We also have blocks with a hole inside them, which are designed for one visit restoration for implant supported restorations, and IPS IMAX CAD abutment meso blocks with the translucence of MO or LC is available in the ModCAD and are indicated for hybrid abutment or hybrid abutment crowns. The other group from the synthetic ceramic is the Zirconia Reinforced Lithium silicate. Despite the great acceptance and broad use of lithium disilicate ceramics for years, the evolution of dental materials has attempted to suppress the remaining disadvantage of the ceramic system by means of development of glass ceramic reinforced with polycrystalline ceramics. This new glass ceramic, I mean Zirconia Reinforced Lithium silicate, were designed to contain lithium silicate as the main crystalline phase in a vitreous matrix reinforced with zirconia dioxide crystals for about 10% the weight. When this material goes through the crystallization process, the nuclide of lithium silicate crystals achieve a mean size 0.5 or 1 microns, and which is much smaller than that of observed for lithium disilicate. The formation of a smaller and finer crystalline phase occurs due to the presence of zirconia particles in the material, which resolved after the crystallization, means that we don't have any zirconia after the crystallization. So what's the benefit of what's the advantage of the zirconia reinforced lithium silicates? Zirconia reinforced lithium silicates, in summary, ZLS material have a microstructure containing smaller crystals, which guarantee this material mechanical properties to be similar to those observed for lithium disilicate. And additionally, this new material maintain the good optical properties and are easily milled with CAD/CAM machines and attain a good surface finishing as they still have a high amount of glass matrix. A particular advantage of the lithium silicate ceramic over the lithium disilicate version is the superior polishability of this material due to the smaller crystal sizes in the microstructure. So let's go to the market and see what blocks are available in the ZLS family. The two existing commercial examples of the lithium silicate material are Suprinity from Vita company, a material marketed in a partially crystallized state and that requires an additional thermal cycle in a furnace, and Celtra-Do from Dentsply Sirona, which is a material that is already in its final crystallization stage. Celtra-Do is available with two translucency of LT and HT. This material can be a one-step material or a two-step material. If we mill it, polish it, and sit it, we only reach the flexural strength about 210 megapascal. But if we put it in the furnace and do a further heat treatment, the flexural strength reach 370 megapascal. The main advantage of this material is the time-saving ability for the production of dental restorations, since they are faster for milling machines and they can be used in their polished states. The other ZLS material was Suprinity, which is launched in the pre-crystallized states. The flexural strength in the pre-crystallized state is about 180, and after the crystallization, the flexural strength reached 480 megapascals. So it's a two-step material. We should have a crystallization for Suprinity, a marked difference between Celtra-2 and the Suprinity is the size of lithium disilicate, which appears to have grown large, and in Celtra-2, it's about 1 micron in the Celtra-2, however, it's 0.5 in the Suprinity. About the indication and the recommended thickness for ZLS material, the ZLS material can be used with both cutback or staining technique, and they are recommended for inlays, onlays, partial crowns, veneers, crowns, and implant supported crowns. And the recommended minimum thickness for the anterior and posterior crown with the staining technique is 1.5 millimeter. And the next group of the ceramic which are going to discuss is the polymer infiltrated ceramic network in the family of hybrid ceramics. In 2030, the product Enamic from Vita was introduced for dental restoration. Let's first talk about the composition of the material. First of all, we are having a ceramic network. It's a feldspathic network you see in the left figure, but not densely sintered. It's sintered approximately 70% of its full density. So first we have a feldspathic network without fully sintered. So we see a little gap between the particles, and what we are doing then is infiltrating a polymer network. So there is a second network within the block made of a polymer. And then we have the hybrid material that is composed of two interconnected networks. Dominantly ceramic for about 86% and polymer for about 14%. The polymeric part of this material is composed of orthon dimethacrylate and triethylene glycol dimethacrylate. We have a flexibility of polymer network and a strength of ceramic, which gives us positive characteristics like excellent bonding properties. Enamic blocks have a flexural strength about 200 megapascal, and they can be only polished. They are available in different sizes and shades, but let's go with the indication of the Enamic. The Enamic is recommended for minimally invasive reconstruction and reconstruction in the cases with limited space available, crowns and even posterior crowns where we have high masticatory force. We can benefit from the elasticity of the material which comes from the polymeric network. It's also indicated for veneers and top tables and anterior or posterior implant supported crowns. This slide is a quick guide about the different types of Enamic blocks. We have beta Enamic T translucent, which is indicated for abutment and molar crowns. Beta Enamic HT high translucence, which is for molar and premolars crowns. Vita Suprinity super translucent, which are indicated for minimally invasive restorations, and Vita Enamic multicolor with tooth shade gradient, which is recommended for highly aesthetic reconstruction in the visible region. The Vita multicolor is a 6-layer block. So the advantage of the Enamic or in general PIC and material polymer infiltrated ceramic network material have the advantage of presenting an elastic modulus that is approximately 50% lower compared to the feldspathic ceramic and closer to the dentine. So they are easier to mill and adjust, and they can be more easily repaired by composite resin. And in comparison to the dental porcelain, this new material has been proven to have a lower elastic modulus and higher damage tolerance. And these all features come from the combination of the polymer with the ceramic network. About the other hybrid ceramic is the resin nanoceramic, and we know these groups with the LEUCITE blocks. The manufacturer is 3M company, and LEUCITE have 80% ceramic with 20% polymer, and the fluctuation is about 210 megapascal. It's one-step material. It should be only polished. We cannot put in the furnace because of its polymeric network, and it's available in different size and shades. The differences, let's compare the LEUCITE and Enamic in the term of the pre-treatment before cementation. The LEUCITE needs no hush of etching, and we just sandblast it, apply sealant, and use adhesive or self-adhesive cement. But for Enamic, we should etch the ceramic with hydrofluoric acid for 60 seconds, and then applying the sealant bond and the cement. And the last group of the ceramics, zirconia, it's a broad group. We can divide the zirconia restoration into monolithic or layered. We for years know zirconia as a structure for framework or for cores as they were
میتونی چه کردی رد و بخش شد از اول زیرکونیا بگی
باشه دو تا سایدم بیشتر نیست دیگه
چون زیرکونیا رو شروع کردی
از اول
دو مرتبه بحث میشن
سلامت باشین میگم این اینترنت من که وصل نیست به اون بازم نمیشه اینترنت من که وصل به برق دانشگاه نیست
اون برای قطع شدن
اون وقت بشن کلا دیگه
بذارش انگار اون هست
شما چرا کامیت من خوششانسی حرف میره میاد تو هستی جا
من وصلم for the disconnection. It was related for a systemic problem, and we continue with the zirconia ceramic again. Zirconia restoration is divided into two subgroups of the monolithic and layered restoration. We, for years, know the zirconia restoration as a core material or framework material because its opacity was not good for aesthetic restoration. But nowadays, we use monolithic zirconia restoration with the introduction of the translucent zirconia. The layered zirconia restorations combine the strength of the ceramic core and the aesthetic of the veneering porcelain, which are the glass or crystalline phase of the fluoroapatite or aluminum oxide or LEUCITE. The zirconia is available in the both type of the block or blank, and different companies offer zirconia in both form of the block or blank. Sirona, Dentplay, Katana, Evoclar, Arom, Zircon, and you can find various type of company for the zirconia blocks. But about the translucent zirconia, which is a new material, translucent zirconia is we know that the translucency of zirconia is less than that of tooth structure and other dental ceramics. And although the lower translucency of zirconia is an advantage in cases with discolored background, but it may be a problem for a replication of a tooth-like appearance, especially adjacent to natural teeth. Manufacturers have presented zirconia ceramics with different visible light transmittance percentage ranging from 20 to 50%. So nowadays we have 5 types of translucence in the market for zirconia, including low translucency, medium translucency, high translucency, super translucency, and ultra translucency. Low and medium translucent zirconia are commonly specified for zirconia frameworks, while high, super, and ultra translucent zirconia are mostly designed for monolithic restorations. But let's talk about a combination of this material, what caused this material to be translucent. The new translucent dental zirconia involve increasing the content of yttrium oxides, resulting in 2 crystalline materials, 4-mole yttrium and 5-mole lithium stabilized zirconia. Due to the increasing of the yttrium oxide content, the cubic phase occurred alongside metastable tetragonal phase, and the quantity of the cubic phase increases from around 25% in the 4-mole yttrium stabilized materials up to 50% in 5-mole materials, in 5-mole yttrium stabilized materials. So the increasing the cubic phase caused the translucency in the materials, and in the translucent, as you see in the lower tables, in the more translucent zirconia, we have more cubic phase and we have more yttrium oxide as a stabilizer. The references of this lecture is listed here. I hope it was an informative lecture for you, and if you have any question, I'm here for you. Thank you for attention.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassanzadeh, for a wonderful presentation. And you presented all the very recent ceramics, and it was for sure useful for the audience. We had a couple of times disconnection, internet disconnection, so probably the audience have questions. If anybody has question, please write it down for us while Dr. Hassanzadeh is here. Meanwhile, I have a question, Dr. Hassanzadeh. In practice, I do work with one lab technician. He always offered me the multicolor zirconia. You presented here the translucent zirconia and the old zirconia, which is completely opaque. So do you recommend us the translucent one and layer it and color it or we go basically with the multicolor zirconia, which comes in the block like A2, A3, A1, A2. Do you have any recommendation for me? Hmm? I had a question for Dr. Hassanzadeh regarding the multicolor zirconia. She presented us the translucent zirconia and the completely opaque zirconia. I would like to ask for her experience with the multicolor zirconia, which it comes with 2 shades together. So the layering and the outcome shade is very beautiful and very acceptable for the patients. Please go ahead.
Zirconia restoration, there is very broad topics that we can have hours of lectures about the zirconia. But about the zirconia, the main disadvantage of layer zirconia was that the chipping of that restoration was very often. So the manufacturers comes to how we can have a monolithic zirconia. And first they try to have polychromatic zirconia restorations, which have 2, 3 or layers of gradient shades in one block, and they can be milled for restoration monochromatic form. But actually, we know that the glassy phase of the ceramics is respective for the aesthetic of the restoration. But in the zirconia, we have no glassy phase, and it's a polycrystalline phase, so it could even the translucent or polychromatic zirconia is not as beautiful as the glass matrix ceramics like Feldspathic or LEUCITE-based ceramics. But there are an option for anterior crowns, which where we needs more flexural strength because the strength is dramatically higher than that of the glass matrix ceramics. There are even when we have the translucent zirconia, the flexural strength comes to 800 megapascal, which is twice larger, bigger than that of the glass matrix ceramics.
Perfect. Thank you for explanation. Can we go with the next lecture, or we can keep asking questions while Dr. Hassanzadeh is here? So Dr. Hassanzadeh mentioned that we do have 2 types of zirconia. We can go with the monolithic zirconia, and we build up the crown fully from zirconia. And on the other hand, we do have the layered zirconia. So the lab technician used the feldspathic porcelain and layered the zirconia. So basically, the adjustment of the zirconia is very time consuming, and it's not in favor of the clinician. So do you recommend us to make one arch from fully, that's my personal question. Do you recommend us for a full mouth reconstruction? If I build up one arch with the monolithic zirconia and the other arch, the opposing dentition with the layered zirconia, so the adjustment would be a kind of easier. And does the micro hardness of 2 different type of porcelain and ceramic, does it affect each other or not?
About the hardness of this material, we know that the zirconia is the most friendly material for the dentition. It has the less wear for the opposing teeth, and even we have the natural teeth opposing the zirconia, it's less, it causes less wear in comparison to other glass matrix ceramics that we use for the layering. For opposing the zirconia into the layer zirconia, it's okay, but we should consider that for monolithic zirconia, it's better to have a interim restoration before and adjust the restoration and then go to the restoration adjustments is the minimum.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Do we have any question here? All right. So we're gonna see you in a couple of minutes for the next lecture by Dr. Nokar. Thank you that you showed us. So for the next lecturer, audience, if anybody has any questions while Dr. Nokar is available, please let us know. It was a very practical presentation. Hopefully very soon every office will be equipped with this type of technology, from scanner to perfect. Thank you so much, Esther.
Thank you, Dr.
And so we can do the scanning and milling or printing at the same day, which is a chairside restoration. So can we go on with the next lecture? So for the next lecture, Dr. Payamini, she's gonna present for us the additive manufacturing techniques. She graduated from Shahid Beheshti Dental School in 2012. Then she went to Advanced Prosthodontics program in Tehran University, and she received her master in prosthodontics in 2016. And since that time, she's a faculty member and teaching in the Advanced Prosthodontics department. Dr. Payamini, if you hear me, please move on.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Digital Prosthetic Dentistry online course. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Leila Payamini. I'm Assistant Professor of Prosthodontics at Tehran University of Medical Sciences. And today, I want to talk about additive manufacturing technology. Additive manufacturing technology has several synonyms: rapid prototyping, direct digital manufacturing, solid-free fabrication, layered manufacturing technology, e-manufacturing, generative manufacturing, and the most known, 3D printing. As you know, there are two basic approaches in digital manufacturing: subtractive versus additive. Subtractive manufacturing technology, in which material is removed from a bulk, selectively removed from a bulk, and additive manufacturing technology, in which materials are selectively fused or deposited, typically in layers, which will result in less waste material. Initially, rapid prototyping was used for research and development in order to decrease the expensive manufacturing processes. But today, 3D printing has gone beyond rapid prototyping, and it is used in diverse sectors such as food, toys, engineering, jewelry, medicine, dentistry, and many other sectors. Since additive manufacturing is capable of delivering precision with a few microns, it is gaining popularity in dentistry, and it has several applications in dentistry, like crown and bridge, denture bases, orthodontic appliances, indirect binding trays, surgical guides, night guards, aligners, special trays, wax-up and frameworks, dental models, and even moreover, hearing aids. As any other technology, 3D printing has its own advantages and disadvantages. Design freedom is considered one of its main advantages. It means that it is virtually unlimited to what can be designed, including hollow devices, which is impossible by subtractive manufacturing technology. The other is produce complex designs. A complex design by 3D printing can be fabricated just in one fabrication cycle. Unlike subtractive manufacturing technology, in which different parts would need to be fabricated and then assembled. The other advantage is ease of use. The complexity of this system is in designing the STL file. Once the file is virtually loaded, it is just like a click and the fabrication commences. The 3D printing disadvantages are as follows. The initial cost, needing some finishing and post-processing steps, and the limited range of material. The concept of 3D printing can be traced back to the invention of 2D inkjet printers. Rather than ink being deposited onto paper for 2D printing, 3D printers uses a variety of materials to create 3D objects from a digital file. Although the concept of 3D printing is simple, relatively simple, the technologies are complex and involve several distinct stages. The first stage is data acquisition, which can be a facial scan, an oral scan, or simply a cast scan. The next step is CAD designing the item by software modeling like ExoCAD, 2Shape, or other CAD softwares. The item can be a model, a prosthesis, or an appliance. The STL file format is then output to the 3D printing software in order to converting or slicing into G code, which is a 3D printer language for printing objects. Once the object is printed, the final step is post-processing the object, which will be discussed later. Regarding the STL file, it should be noted that the closer the triangles are arranged, it will result in the higher resolution of the printed object. The majority of commercially available additive manufacturing processes build a part in Z-axis, and material is deposited, transfers to the Z-axis in XY plane, and layers are sequentially deposited. And depending on the process, additional support structures are often needed in order to fix the part during layering process and support overhangs against the force of gravity. Unlike subtractive manufacturing technology, there are widely different fabrication methods used in additive manufacturing technology. The 7 main categories can be broadly classified as follows: vat polymerization, material extrusion, powder bed fusion, material jetting, binder jetting, direct energy deposition, and sheet lamination. A stereolithographic apparatus is the first method of 3D printing, which was developed in 1984 by Charles Hall. It's a kind of vat polymerization process, and it consists of a vat, which is filled with a photosensitive liquid resin that is cured by a light source. In SLA, the light source is always a laser beam, which traces or draws at the pattern point by point, layer by layer, until the printing is finished. And you can see here the platform on which first the supporting structure and then the main object is printed. And you can see the elevator, which is connected to platform, which moves upward and downward in the axis. Formlabs and GWS are 2 of the most famous investors of this technology. Let's watch a video about it, about SLA.
Once the liquid thermoset resin is loaded in the vat and the digital instructions are programmed, the laser unit directs an ultraviolet beam to a reflective mirror. From there, a galvanomotor system steers the focused beam to the resin surface. First, the laser draws layers of the support structures, followed by actual part geometry. After a layer is imaged on the resin surface, an elevator system shifts the build platform down, and a recoater blade moves across the platform to apply the next layer of resin. The process is repeated layer by layer until the build is complete.
Okay. Now, SLA method has its own advantages. The final products are detailed, very accurate, and they have smooth surface. The limitations of this technique is its cost and time in comparison to other back polymerization process. So SLA is ideal for printing small detailed objects. In dentistry, it is used for printing surgical guides, provisional crown and bridge, dental models, and custom trays. Digital light processing, or DLP, is another kind of back polymerization process. DLP is a variation of SLA. It also uses a liquid resin, but it uses a projector to expose and cure the liquid resin by projecting an image of each layer rather than using a laser and drawing each layer point by point, So DLP reduces the time, less material is needed, which reduces the cost. And so DLP is ideal for mass production. SLA and DLP are both used in the dentistry, although SLA is at least 5 more accurate than DLP, but the speed, simplicity, and durability of DLP has made it the first choice of dental professionals all over the world. Continuous digital light processing, or CDLP, is another kind of back polymerization process. But just like DLP, it uses a whole image of each layer. But the difference is that the light source in DLP is usually an arc lamp. However, the light source in CDLP is LED and O2. The other difference, as the name implies, is that the platform continuously moves rather than pausing and replenishing, which speeds up printing and makes it even faster than DLP. The final products are detailed, they have a smooth surface, and they can also be flexible. The second main method of 3D printing is material extrusion. Material extrusion devices are known by a trademark name, FDM, fused deposition modeling, or a generic term of FFF, fused filament fabrication. The material is most often a solid filament, which is progressed through a heated extrusion nozzle. It melts and then solidifies after being deposited. This system also is capable of delivering supporting structures of a different material from the object, which can be easily discarded by dissolving. Stratus and Unimaker are two of the most famous inventors of this technique. And it acts like a glue gun. Fused deposition modeling, or FDM, is slower than SLA, but the final products have a high degree of detail and durability with excellent thermal, physical, and chemical properties. The wax filament can be used to produce wax patterns of fixed and removable denture frameworks. The typical layer thickness is 0.25 of a millimeter. However, layers as fine as 400 of a millimeter can be deposited with certain material. Powder bed fusion is the third main method of 3D printing. And selective laser sintering, or SLS, is a kind of powder bed fusion. SLS is equal to SLA, but instead of a vat of liquid resin, it uses a vat of powder, which is sintered by a laser. Unlike other methods, don't need any supporting structure. However, residual stresses are found to be large in this technique. It doesn't need supporting structure because the object, the printed object, is encased with the powder. And the other advantage is that the excess powder can be recycled to print other objects. 3D system EOS and Infiltrated are some of the most famous investors of this technique. The powder can be ceramic, metal, or thermoplastic material. And in dentistry, SLS can be used to produce all ceramic dental restorations, metal partial dental frameworks, and acrylic provisional prosthetics. Selective laser melting, or SLM, also known by a trademark name of direct metal laser sintering, DMLS, is another kind of laser powder bed fusion. Just like SLM, it uses laser, very similar to SLM, but exclusively uses metal. And unlike SLS, SLM requires the rigid support in order to avoid distortion during printing. And Renishaw is one of the major investors of this technique. SLM printing process is lengthy. However, the final products are intricate and lattices and hollows and can be easily fabricated by this technique, which is ideal for cobalt chrome dentures, metal copings, for crowns, fixed partial dentures, full contour prostheses, and custom-made dental implants. EBM, or electron beam melting, is another kind of powder bed fusion. It's very similar to SLM, but instead of laser, it uses electron beam. And since the process takes place under vacuum, EBM is suitable for reactive materials with high affinity for oxygen, like CP titanium, which is used for prosthetic implants. The process is lengthy, expensive, and it can be used for conductive metal. Multi-jet fusion is the last method of powder bed fusion. It is relatively new, which was introduced in 2016, and it claims to reduce printing time by 10 times compared to other 3D printing techniques. The process involves thermal energy rather than a laser. The final products are intricate, smooth, resilient, and they are also resistant to weathering and caustic chemical agents. One of its dental applications is to print clear orthodontic aligners like Invisalign. Material jetting is the fourth main method of 3D printing. Material jetting is very similar to 2D inkjet printer. It delivers material through a nozzle, drop by drop, from layers, which are cured by a UV light. And material jetting advantages include superior quality and speed, high precision, and its uniqueness. The uniqueness of material jetting is that multicolor and multi-property materials can be selected for one single object. And the other advantage is that the choice of material is also diverse. However, the drawbacks are its high cost and potentially big products. Nanoparticle jetting, or NPJ, is identical to material jetting but uses nanoparticles of ceramics or metals which are delivered in an aqueous solution. And after heat application, the liquid evaporates, remaining the residue of ceramic and metal, which are forming the 3D objects. Drop on demand, or DOD, is another kind of material jetting. It uses two nozzles, one for waxed material and the other for the solvent supporting structure material. After printing is finished, the supporting structure is removed, remaining the waxed material as the final product. It is useful for fabricating wax pattern for casting dental alloys. Binder jetting is the fifth main method of 3D printing. And it uses a bonding agent to stick particles together to form successive layers. It uses powder. The powder can be ceramic, gypsum, or metal. And just like powder bed fusion, no supporting structure is required, as the process uses the powder bed for the support. It's a relatively fast and inexpensive process. However, post-processing time is long and onerous, and it lacks structural integrity, which makes it unsuitable for end-use products unless they are post-processed by infiltration of cyanoacrylate or epoxy resin to enhance their physical and mechanical properties. It is ideal for prototypes, casting patterns, and unit structures. Post-processing, it depends on the type of 3D printing process and may involve trimming supports like in DLP and SLA and SLM, of course. Or it can be removing excess powder, which is required in powder bed fusion technique, and dissolving the supporting structure and rinsing. Rinsing is often done by 90% isopropyl alcohol, which is used to remove the excess monomer, which is toxic and must be removed. The object may require additional post-processing, such as UV curing, sandblasting, metal plating, sintering, painting, infiltration, thermal treatment, polishing, finishing, and sterilizing. Let's take a quick look at literature. Calder et al. Evaluated the trueness of a CAD/CAM milled denture and a 3D printed denture, and they concluded that CAD/CAM milled printed dentures are superior to the 3D printed dentures, and in terms of the trueness of interior surface. And also several studies suggest that 3D printed dentures should be used as an interim denture because of their adaptation and their lower strengths. Additive et al. In a review article compared the internal fit, marginal fit, bond strength, fracture strength, and accuracy of laser sintered dental processes with conventional castings. And they concluded that laser sintering system seems to be a promising alternative technique for conventional techniques. And they can be easily used for fixed restoration, facial prosthesis, titanium implants, surgical models, and stents. Et al. Evaluated the accuracy of removable partial denture frameworks, which were fabricated by casting a 3D printed pattern with partial denture frameworks, which were fabricated by selective laser sintering. And their results showed that overall discrepancies were smaller for SLS frameworks, so suggested the SLS framework as a superior technique. Rio et al. Evaluated the marginal and internal fit of 3D printed provisional crowns according to their build angle, and the marginal adaptation was clinically acceptable in all the groups, in all build angles. However, the internal fit was different depending on the build angle, and considering both marginal and internal integrity, 150 and 180 degree were recommended as the optimal build directions. Jean et al. Evaluated the effect of the build angle on tissue surface adaptation of dentures, maxillary and mandibular, and they found no significant difference between the groups. However, the color deviation maps showed that 135 degree for maxillary and 100 degree for mandibular can be the appropriate direction angles, although the results were not significant. Wang et al. Evaluated the trueness of external surface, internal surface, marginal area, and interior occlusal surface of the 3D printed zirconia crowns at CAD/CAM zirconia crowns. And the results showed that the 3D printed zirconia crowns were no worse than the zirconia milled crowns, which suggests that 3D printing might be suitable for fabricating zirconia crowns. And beyond this, evaluated the load-bearing capacity of CAD-CAM 3D printed zirconia, CAD-CAM milled zirconia, and heat-pressed lithium disilicate ultra-thin official veneers. And despite a statistically significant difference between these two groups, all the groups showed the capacity exceeded the clinically acceptable normal bite forces. So all the groups are acceptable. However, it's obvious that further studies are needed to needed on biomechanical and clinical properties of this technique to determine the superior technique. Thank you for your nice attention.
Thank you, Dr. Payaminia, for your very detailed information that you gave us on this subject. Thank you so much. Because we are behind the time and our last lecturer is at Toronto and she's there. It is 5:30 a.m. I can't wait, and I can say more thanks to you. I can't appreciate enough you for your nice lecture. I go directly to our last lecturer, Dr. Esther Somji-Gans. Dr. Gans, thank you so much. We are so grateful. I know that it is very early in the morning and you have always cooperated with us. And so let's go directly to your introduction because I know that it must be very difficult for you to get up early in the morning. And with your permission, Dr. Gans has a bright career and a lot of degrees and achievements. She earned her DMD at the Semmelweis University of Medicine, Budapest, and her PhD on the topic of calcium binding proteins in bone and dentin from the Karolinska Institute Center for Oral Biology in Stockholm before coming to the University of Toronto Faculty of Dentistry to complete specialty training and an MSc in prosthodontics. Her topic was accuracy of dynamic computer-guided implant surgery. This was followed by a fellowship in maxillofacial prosthodontics and oral oncology at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, Texas. She is an assistant professor teaching a stream at the Faculty of Dentistry, University of Toronto, full-time. She is also the clinical and research director for the craniofacial prosthetic unit at the Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center, where she is responsible for the extraoral prosthetic rehabilitation of patients. Recently, she received the GSK Prosthodontist Innovator Award for a project regarding bone preservation with electromagnetic implants from the ACP Education Foundation. Dr. Gans are going to talk about dynamic navigation in implant dentistry. I think still this topic is very new and we are honored to have you with us, Dr. Gans. Please go on with
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Dr. Farid, and also thank you very much for inviting me here today. Let me just share my screen. As I said, I am going to talk about dynamic computer-guided navigation. And listening to my own CV, I realize I like to travel a lot. I think that's one thing that comes out of it. Dynamic computer-guided navigation is close to my heart because that's what I did my master's degree on while I was doing my prosthodontic degree in Toronto. And good afternoon to you and good morning to me. Financial disclosure, because this was part of my master's project, I have to disclose that I was involved in the research and development of the Navident system, which is the one I'm most familiar with and I'm going to talk about today. But I am not financially funded by them anymore, so I don't think that I have any bias talking about these. So when it comes to implant placement, I'm sure if you place implants, you're all very familiar with prosthetically driven treatment planning and how we have to follow principles to make sure that that implant is not only placed, but also becomes restorable and also functionally stable in the long term. So to achieve this, usually we execute some kind of prosthetic plan, which is necessary to be, it's necessary that the patient has some imaging. Then we very often do a virtual plan. Then we place our implants based on this virtual plan, and then hopefully we are going to have an aesthetically and functionally satisfactory restoration for the patient. And then of course comes the maintenance. What I am going to talk about mostly today is the prosthetic planning, imaging, the plan and the placement portion, which is all involved in the navigation system dynamic guidance. Just very, very briefly, we all know that freehand implant placement, where we literally just eyeball an implant and place it, is perfectly acceptable, especially if there is plenty of bone and there are no close by anatomical structures. So, old-fashioned, but it's still valid. Also does not expose the patient necessarily to radiation, so one can just take a periapical radiograph and place an implant. Perfectly fine. Then another option that we can do to have prosthetically driven treatment planning is to fabricate cast guides based on surgical guides based on casts or panoramic x-rays. In today's day and age, this can be very well done with 3D printed guides, just like my the previous speaker has introduced it. And then a little bit more of an involved design is when the guides are actually based on imaging and it's correlated to the bone. So in this case, we are going to have a virtual plan, a virtual implant placement, and a very accurate guide manufactured based on this. What I am going to talk about more today is dynamic guiding, and very often dynamic guiding looks like this. Let me see if I can just get my pointer. This is the Navidance system, and this is what I am most familiar with. I will also talk a little bit about the X-Guide system, which is a system from the US. Very often I just usually call them like ET because they have two nice big eyes, but the point is they usually have a camera, which is somewhere on top and has an arm, a flexible arm that can move this camera around. Then there is a monitor where one can plan and also follow the surgery. And then very often there is something very heavy in the bottom so that the whole system doesn't topple over. And I have robotics on my list. I am going to talk very, very briefly about robotics, which I am not personally familiar with, but I think it's a very exciting new field to come. So what exactly is dynamic guiding or navigation? If you look at the literature, you're going to find both terms. So dynamic guiding is a way to implement a virtual treatment plan that we execute on a computer in real time on our patients without actually having a CBCT taken at the moment, and combines it motion tracking technology. Now, when I say motion tracking, what I mean is what you might be all familiar with. You can take whatever big cinema movie today, and where we see blue people or monkeys or monsters. Very often these characters are based on actors, and there's usually a camera that is going to capture how the actor moves, and then a computer is going to change these facial movements and implement it on an imaginary character. Now, the camera is not enough. In our case, the camera, here you see that there's only one camera in front of this character. Usually for dynamic navigation, you need two of them so that you actually have a stereoptic system and you can see in 3D, that you can see field of depth. So usually this is why there are, in any system, you will find two cameras. So you can see that's one of them, that's the other one of them that is giving you, this is the Navidance system, on a 10-meter distance, it actually gives a 0.2 millimeter accuracy, which is, especially for implant surgeries, or it's also used for neurosurgeries or ENT surgeries, it's very, very important. You also see that when this technology actually, the way it's carried out, you can see that there are markers. So for instance, on this individual's face, there are markers that is going to be detected by this camera, and that's how it is translated by the computer to the character. Now, in our case, the markers are usually attached to the patient in some way, or there are some other systems, and I'll talk about this with the Navident system, how else you can actually correlate the patient to the CBCT. And you're going to have a marker on the surgical drill or any kind of instrument to make sure that the camera, again, which is in the system, is going to see these and can correlate them in 3D. Plus, of course, we are not in robotics yet, so we also need an operator, and the operator is the surgeon in this case. It's also very useful if the surgeon has some computer skills, and I put flight simulators in here because, it's very difficult in the beginning to actually start moving your hands, and not moving your hands according to your eyes, but actually moving your hands according to how it happens on the computer screen. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to translate, from buccal to lingual, from up to down, because it's just a computer screen and an arrow that you're looking at. What we also need, of course, is an address, as in we need the virtual plan, and we have to make sure that our plan is accurate so that the computer can help us to place that implant exactly where we planned it. And that's usually happening on the computer screen. It can be done before the surgery, or if any kind of corrections are necessary, it can be done also during the surgery. And hopefully this will all equal a beautifully placed, nicely restorable implant. Now, if you wanted to look at this, this is the XNAP system. It's from an article that I will quote later. So you can see that this is their system. They actually have the camera you can see up there. So those are going to be the eyes. Those are going to be the camera portions. These are the markers. They have a little bit of a different system. You see that it kind of looks almost like a little roller that is connected to the patient. And also there are markers, these grayish yellow, the grayish blackish markers that are connected to the surgical handpiece. And then, of course, there is the navigation portion where you can see this, marker moving according to how the implant is placed. And you can also see that the drill actually moves on the patient's CBCT. So if there's any kind of anatomical structure, or if there is not enough bone, then it can be very useful to see exactly where that drill is in the bone on the CBCT instead of just approximating it in the patient. So how would this look like? And this is the fiducial marker meaning those reference points that we attach both to the patient and to the handpieces or tools. How would that workflow look like? So the whole thing starts by making some kind of a splint or some kind of a tag that is going to have a reference in it. This can be done with or without impressions. And this is a nice advantage of the system or these systems, that one can pretty much get the patient in, have the reference marker made, get the imaging done, and even proceed to surgery if absolutely necessary, pretty much within an hour. One does not have to wait for any kind of manufacturing. So this is usually a chairside procedure. It takes about 5 minutes or so, usually involves some kind of a thermoplastic material. Once the splint is done, this is a splint. This was one of the early versions. These days, mostly there are little tags, and I'll show you how they look like. Then the patient is going to have a radiopaque marker attached to the splint and have a CBCT taken. There is usually no need for any kind of radiopaque teeth or anything such. The CBCT is taken, the image is going to be processed just like any other implant surgery. You're going to have the DICOM files, you will import them, and like if you ever used any virtual implant planning software, most of these systems have it included, so you can just plan as you normally would. Once you have your treatment plan and you placed your implant, you make sure that it's in bone, that it's the right size of implant. You can choose your brand, you can choose your size, you can choose your diameter. Once the ideal plan is achieved, then instead of the radiopaque marker, one will attach some kind of a shape with very obvious points. With the XNAV system, it was that roller. With the Navidance system, it's these black and white targets that the camera is going to recognize and the computer is going to be able to calculate with. Then the drill guide has to be calibrated. You see that here the drill guide actually has this little handle, again with the black and white markers. And you can see that the patient has this, I just used to call it Mickey Mouse. I don't know why, because it kind of looks like it has 2 ears. But so it has this other marker attached to the patient's mouth. We calibrated. Calibration usually takes less than a minute. It's just a wrist movement. And we are ready for surgery. So if somebody has a CBCT in their office and they have this virtual navigation system or dynamic navigation system, it can literally be an hour before we can implement a virtual guide and start drilling an implant in the patient's mouth. So it is very nice and flexible. What is the difference between any kind of static guide and dynamic navigation? So in the top, you see that we have static guidance. In the bottom, we have dynamic guidance. In both cases, one has to scan the patient, sometimes scan the prosthesis, or just have a digital plan. And then we have to plan the procedure. The difference is when we get to production, usually with the static guidance, one has to produce these guides somehow, either with a commercial laboratory or with 3D printing in office. However, in dynamic navigation, one can pretty much proceed to image-to-patient registration. Another major difference, and I think this is actually a key, is that with static guidance, we use those drill keys, we use the drill keys, we use the specific drills, but we are stuck. So if that guide doesn't fit, if something is not accurate, the only option we have is just to throw the guide out the window and do it freehand or get the patient back with a different guide. However, with dynamic navigation, what we have to do is, one needs to have some dexterity because there's no guiding planes that will guide us. But once the placement is not optimal for some reason, we can actually backtrack. We can, instead of remaking it, we can just get back, plan again, and proceed that way. So I also have a little bit of, and again, if necessary, we can also be flexible, which is, I think, very important. So I have a little bit of a table here between dynamic guiding and static guiding, and I try to also color code it so that green is good and red is not so good. So if one looks at dynamic guidance, I feel that it's very time and cost efficient, even though the system costs a certain amount of money, but afterwards, each surgery does not cost as much money as if you had to fabricate the surgical guides all the time. And also, we do not need that fabrication time. It's open. It works with any implant system. It is possible to visually confirm that we are at the right place. And so there's actually a feedback loop, and one can correct if something is, or recalibrate if it's not accurate. It is very possible to irrigate because the surgical field can actually be completely free of any kind of stent or guide. So irrigation is very possible. It can be done flaplessly if one trusts the system enough. Ergonomics is improved. It is very easy to access posterior regions because there is no guide that would be in the way. However, because we are working with cameras and we are working with this big cart, it's important that nothing is in the way. So the assistant's hand, the surgeon's head, the patient's, protective equipment cannot be between the markers and the cameras, because then the whole system doesn't work. And also it's a learning curve. One doesn't get up in the morning and knows instantaneously how this works. And of course, dexterity, because there's no guiding channels. So one has to have a really nice and steady hand to do this. Whereas static guiding, obviously one has a lot of help with dexterity, so you don't have to hold your hand because it's going to be guided by the guide. But other than that, it's more time consuming. Sometimes it's implant system specific, depending on the planning system. The guide cannot really be altered. If it's not great or doesn't fit, then it has to be modified or remade. Visibility sometimes is limited. Cooling of the surgical site is also limited. And spacing in the posterior, especially with limited opening, might be a challenge if one wants to use these guides. So the systems that are available, X-Guide and Novident, I would say, are the most well-known, and Novident actually was developed here in Toronto, Canada. There is another Canadian version, which is called Enliant. It comes from Vancouver. There's another system from Taiwan called EPED. And I have seen a system called Mini Novident from Switzerland, which is kind of an interesting design. It's a mini camera on the handpiece. But the most widely used ones are X-Guide, Novident, and probably in Asia, the EPED system. I am going to mostly talk about the X-Guide and the Novident system because these are the ones that are, as said, the most widely used. So for the X-Guide, they use an X-clip, which is literally just a tiny bit of a clip that has some thermoplastic material in there that is attaching to the teeth on one side. You can see that's the little green figure here, the little green form. And then they usually attach some kind of radiopaque marker for the scanning procedure so that they can correlate the scan to the patient afterwards. Then one can plan, one can use virtual prosthetic teeth, set them up, or use an intraoral scan and integrate it with the CBCT and plan the ideal implant placement. Then comes calibration, which with most of the systems, very, very quick. It takes about a minute or so. And this is the system check that I was telling about. So if one touches a tooth with the burr, right? It should be showing on the screen that the burr is touching the tooth. If it doesn't, something is not right. Either the marker has moved or the system is not calibrated properly, but one has this feedback loop that will ensure accuracy, which is very helpful. And once this is done, nothing remaining but to start navigation surgery. And if all goes well, I have a little video to show you how it's approximately done. And this is just that little intraoral marker that is going to hold the fiducial markers. And you can see that the surgeon's position is actually different because the surgeon is looking at the screen instead of looking at the patient, which is very difficult because you have to trust the system. But with this, with this paradigm shift, one eventually learns and trusts the system and doesn't look at the patient while doing surgery in their mouth. It's a bit scary in the beginning, but one can get it. So this is their video, and you can see how it actually works. This is their calibration system where they tell the cameras where the tip of the burr is. And this is the step that I said that you can actually show it to the cameras. And this is their navigation window. So you can see that it shows the angulation, how much one is off. It shows the horizontal positioning, and it also shows the depth. And you can see that as they are drilling, the depth gauge is changing. So as long as it's green, they are having the right depth. One can also follow it on the screen where how close you are. This is a typodont, but with patients, you can actually see how far you are going in the bone, how close you are to the nerve. The Novident system, as said, is a little bit different. So it actually has these black and white markers, but it's also a card system with a computer and the camera involved. And it's the same again, the positioning, and this is their user interface. You can see the little peg that is showing how far one is off horizontally. They have a depth marker that also has very often like a parking signal, like in cars, when you start reversing, then you go beep, 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 beep. And then when it's a continuous sound, you know that you reached your depth and you should be stopping. But this is the part that I was talking about. You can actually see how far you are and where you are within the bone and where your drill tip is, so that you are really nice and accurate. And then Novident actually has a different type of registration now, when one does not actually need some kind of something attached to the patient's dentition. They trace some hard tissues, and it has a funny headgear for the patient. But the point is that they can just trace the teeth and relate this information to the computer, and the computer will realize like, oh, now you are tracing the buccal surfaces of the maxillary incisors. And with this information, one can start the surgery a little bit faster, meaning one doesn't need a stent. And it even works if the patient had a previous CBCT, because you do not have to have the specific marker for the system. And to my knowledge, the Novident system is the only one that has this trace registration to date. I wanted to talk just 2 words about YOMI, which is robot-assisted dental surgery. The principle is very, very similar. As in there is a guiding system. The only difference is that it kind of tries to combine virtual navigation and static guidance, because with virtual navigation, there is no guide that actually guides your hand, that holds your hand in place. I mean, if one has steady hands, that's easy going. But if one doesn't have steady hands, then it's not so easy. Now, YOMI is a robotic arm, which actually is, you still hold the burr, you are still holding the handpiece, but this arm is going to guide your hand, as in if you try to go too deep, or if you try to go to left or to right, it's not going to allow you. So it's going to give you some mechanical stops and helps you place the implants that way. It's an expensive system. It's quite bulky, as you can see. And I'm not sure, I don't have very much experience with it, so I'm not sure how practical it is. It is a little bit more involved than having just the virtual or static guidance, to my knowledge. I mean, if the person is gone and only the robot stays, that's a little bit different. But with the person, I'm not 100% sure what the major advantage of this system would be. Now let's talk a tiny bit about accuracy, because you can tell me like, yeah, sure, you told us that you should trust the system and not even look at the patient while you're doing surgery. So when it comes to the accuracy of these systems, we usually look at deviation horizontally at the implant platform, look at deviation at the apex, and then we also look at the deviation of the axis of the implant in degrees. And this is me a lifetime ago, and this is the Novident system before it became really nice and commercially available. It was the early version. You see that there is a light, the camera is separate, that there is a monitor, and I was working on my Buddy Max, that's a typodont, and drilled 400-500 osteotomies. So this was the first iteration of the system. This is when we were still developing it. It wasn't available. And I did my master's project. I looked at the accuracies, and the accuracy was, I compared it with just the laboratory guide, a Straumann guide, a Simplant guide, and the Noble guide. And the accuracy was actually very similar all across the board. What was really scary, and I was not the only one. So you can say, well, the values are like this because I have shaky hands, but I actually had 2 colleagues who helped me. The scary thing is that it doesn't matter which system we use, how accurate it is. There is going to be always a few outliers, and these are in millimeters. So if you can imagine that at its worst, any of these systems can be off by 3-4 millimeters, that's a little bit of a scary thought. So having said that, one has to trust the system. I think it's very important that we don't trust the system blindly. That mental control has to be there all the time. And this is just the angulation, the axis deviations that you can see. Now, this is just one of our early results. You can see that the yellow was the planned placement, then the blue overlaid was the actual placed implant. This is a little bit off because the surgeon actually wanted to go a little bit deeper for better primary stability. And the yellow implant was not placed because there was not enough bone. It would have been an immediate implant. So you can see that one can actually achieve quite good accuracy with this system. And this is just an overlay. You can see that, even in real life, you can place really nice and accurate implants. when it comes to the literature and you look at how static and dynamic guidance compares and how the accuracy is, there are several systematic reviews out there by now. This is the ITI consensus conference. Important thing is that, you know, the accuracy errors don't always come from the surgeon or the planning. Sometimes it can come from even the imaging techniques. CBCTs have been shown to have possibly up to 1 millimeter errors, right? So you're already starting with 1 millimeter there. Then it comes to static guidance, which is the fabricated guides. The errors at the entry point, again, can be up to 1 millimeter, at the apex a tiny bit more. Angulation on average about 3 degrees. And when it comes to depth differences, about 0.5 millimeter. So if you look at these numbers, it's fairly obvious why we need to have 2 millimeters of safety zone when we are planning our implants. This is another systematic review by Dr. Tahmaseb, and their findings were that this is a little bit older, this review, and their finding was that the static systems were more accurate than dynamic, but they established that most of the static data was on in vitro and dynamic data was mostly in vivo, so that also makes it a little bit less accurate. And the more recent papers, if you look at them, this is one where they were actually looking at dynamic navigation specifically. And what I have mentioned, what's nice about it is that you have the real-time feedback. It's very streamlined, not time-consuming. You can see better if you want, and also can adapt to the intraoperative findings. You can replan if necessary, and you can irrigate. Current state, this is from Holland. They say they need more evidence, but they say that computer-assisted surgery is definitely better than just freehand implant placement, especially if it's a more complex case because of bone availability or the prosthetic solutions. This is a paper from Italy by Dr. Stefanelli. He was one of the early adopters of the Navident system, and he found that the deviation, as in errors, are very similar to what I have reported, except that this is on patients. It's about 230 patients. And what is interesting, that's why I put this table here, is that he actually looked at his accuracy for the first 50 implants that he placed and the last 50 implants that he placed. And you can see that his accuracy has actually improved considerably just by getting used to the system. So, you know, as said, one gets up in the morning, one does not know how to place implants virtually or with the dynamic navigation system. That experience is necessary. This is another paper where they were looking at comparison of freehand placement, partially guided where they only guided the drilling, and fully guided where they actually guided the implant placement as well. And you can see that the accuracy is better with the guided dynamic solution. And this is the last one. This is on the EPET system from Taiwan. And the values are pretty much the same across the board. They were comparing static guidance with dynamic guidance, and you can see that the values are virtually the same. So having said all this, you know, if we think of the evolution of the computer, first we had really big computers, then a bit smaller computers, then came the flat screens, and eventually, you know, we are at the point where things are slowly disappearing and being really miniaturized. And when it comes to dentistry, that will come with probably virtual or augmented reality. And eventually, it will also get to the point where we actually only have the patient and even the operator disappears, right? And what I'm trying to say with this is there are systems coming where we don't even need that big cart anymore, because the guidance is actually visible virtually with, you know, like a Microsoft Lens or Google Glasses. A lot of systems are trying to adapt their innovations to this. I would say, having tried this, it's a little bit confusing because, you know, it's nice that you have the screen, but one also has to concentrate on the surgery. The advantage of this version would be is that you're not actually having to look at a screen somewhere in the distance. You can look at the patient and have the screen in your peripheral vision. And this is an interesting thing. This is a report from China, and this is where the operator disappears. This was a couple of years ago by now, where they actually placed an implant with a robot. So this is, people were around just to make sure that everything was fine, but there was no person involved in the surgery. They actually placed it with an implant and used the Novident markers and the Novident camera for this, but it was a fully automated robotic guided surgery. So, you know, if I think between the innovations towards YOMI or the innovations towards full robotics, I think eventually we are going to get to full robotics. And you can look at their data. You can see that their accuracy values were also very, very similar. And they looked at the ISQ, the implant stability values, and everything seemed just fine. So I think this is exactly where we are going, especially in remote areas where there is no manpower necessarily to place implants. Eventually, I think the systems are going to be good enough that we can trust them even without people and place implants that way. So just a couple of key points to take home about dynamic navigation. It is definitely a flexible method, and you can actually follow your drilling in real time with some kind of markers, motion capture on the patient's CBCT, so you can see how your drill moves in the bone, which I think is pretty cool. The accuracy is very comparable to static guides, and there's a feedback loop, so you can always double check if you're accurate enough. It's reasonable ergonomics. You know, you are looking at a screen, you don't have to crouch too much. One can cool, and there is good access to the surgical site. It also theoretically supports flapless surgery. The disadvantages might be that, you know, if a small operatory is available, then this might not be the best option. Line of sight, one has to really learn how to position themselves so that none of the body parts are in the way of the camera to actually see those markers. Dexterity is important because, as said, nothing is holding your hand. So if somebody has shaky hands, probably this is not the system for them. And there is definitely a learning curve. It's a paradigm shift. One has to be able to translate, you know, computer screen movements to hand movements. And, you know, it's not enough that you translate it, but it also kind of, as soon as you move from the maxilla to the mandible, all the movements shift around. So it's not as simple as it sounds, but it's definitely learnable and doable. And I think the very last take-home message is that, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of tools we use, be that the Stone Age, the Dark Age, or the computer age, they're still just tools and they do not replace people. So I would suggest that you always have your mental guidance in place at the same time. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have, I'm not sure if we have any time for questions, but if you have questions, please do ask them. Or if not, then please contact me via email. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for listening. I think we lost Dr. Farid. I don't know if anyone has any questions or any notes or any experience with dynamic guidance already.
Actually, not with dynamic guidance, but I do agree with your last statement that everything about the practitioner, they should be good enough in their work, and then use the different kinds of technologies. As we were talking about digital technology like CAD/CAM systems and conventional systems, every of them could be good for some situations, and some of them is better in another situation. So it is about the practitioner that should be skillful enough. However, I should again express our thank because you it is early morning in your country and you accepted our invitation. We are so grateful. Thank you so much. And your lecture and the topic is always very actually attractive for us. Thank you so much, Dr. Gans.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your invitation.
You're welcome. It was an honor to have you with us.
And have a continued nice course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So everybody, let's put the end to the program. If you want to have certification, you should have attended the course more than 90%. And for the people who have certification, they can directly come here and participate in our on-site course that is about a clinical course, a short clinical course on digital prosthetic dentistry. I wish you a good day and goodbye, everybody. Yes, tomorrow in the morning of Tehran time, we will be with you again. So see you around tomorrow. Okay.